Hi, Courtney McCullough here from Courtney's Book Club, and this time we're doing The Class Trip by Bibi Faz Rice, or I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Bibi Faz Rice. Now this story is a little different compared to, or this book's stylized a little differently than other books. This is a classic dime store mystery sort of book. You know, small, compact, kind of a light read because it's easy to get through, but still a pretty compelling story. Yeah, here back in the day it was worth $3.50. This book is from 1993, the first printing. And I hear my co-star at the door, my co-host. I'll be right back. And we're back. And this time my co-host, co-star, adorable little mascot is here. Tell the world hello, Salem. Anyway, a dime store, simple. Typically you think about the romances, though, not the mysteries. So, this is also an Edgar Award nominee. I don't know if it won or not. I don't think it did, but... And of course, the little tagline is, the in crowd is hanging out with a killer. Okay. So, I think I've already read this in the previous episode as a way of getting you pumped for this. But I'm going to read it. Yes, baby. Okay. I'm going to read it again to just, get in the mood. Angie Parker used to be a nobody at Oak Ridge High. Then she shed a few pounds, her glasses, and her loser image. Now she's become part of the hottest clique at school. When spring break rolls around, Angie can't wait to go on a canoe trip with her new friends to isolated Shadow Island. But when one of the guys dies mysteriously, it looks like they're camping out with a murderer. After a storm destroys their canoes, the group discovers that they're trapped on Shadow Island. Angie and the others watch helplessly as, one by one, the kids in their group meet horrible deaths. Soon, only the murderer and the final victim will be left on Shadow Island. But will Angie survive that long? Well, yep. I think my allergies are acting up, gang. The weather's changing. The weather's changing and it's killer. Oh. So. I think I'm going to give you a quick rundown of our characters that play here. Starting with the one whose perspective, pardon me, whose perspective we see during the book. Because the book is written in first person. It's Angie's point of view. So, Angie comes from a rather wealthy family for the time. Her dad's like this big giant in the pharmaceutical industry. He owns several pharmacy shops. He's a big shot, But Angie was always kind of mousy, and some of the others in the group like to bring up her unpopular past and remind everybody how she's just lucky to be there and be part of their group now. But, Angie still has her science nerd feelings. She's real big on science. It's like one of her best subjects. She's hoping to go pre-med. When they graduate, she's a junior. I think several of the students here are juniors, except for I think Ron. And Chip. Ron and Chip, I think, are the two seniors in the group. Okay, and so Angie's the newer member of this clique. She's kind of quiet. She's one of the smarter ones. And to be honest, she's not really 100% sure she feels okay fitting in like she does. Or she doesn't really feel like she does fit in. And so she's just a little uncertain about things. But hey, she's here. She's made it. She's hoping she can keep it up. Then there is the ever popular Christabel. One moment. Christabel is introduced here. Every high school must have its reigning beauty, just as every wolf pack needs a leader. And that's what Christabel Collins was. Queen, leader, golden-haired goddess. She ruled the best, the most exclusive clique in school. The one everyone wanted to be part of, but which included only the prettiest, most popular girls, like Christabel and Melanie Downs and Tracy Fisher. And then, of course, Angie goes on to say, and well, me. I was in the group now. Lucky me. And then, of course, Melanie Downs. Melanie is the more stereotypical mean girl. She's the one that's constantly putting everybody else down. And she just has this air of superiority over her. So, Melanie was as gorgeous in a brunette, dark-eyed way as Christabel was stunningly blonde. You had to look good. You had to be good-looking to run in this crowd. I know, it took a major makeover. Hair, wardrobe, body, contact lenses for me to make the grade. But for all her looks and charm, there was a streak of bitchiness in Melanie that lay only barely submerged just beneath the surface. Melanie's family isn't nearly as wealthy as Angie's, so that's a point of contention. There's also, again, the fact that Angie was a nerd just a little while back, and now she's part of them. They don't sit right with Melanie. But, it is what it is. And then there's Tracy Fisher. Tracy was a tall, sandy-haired jockette. Although she ate like Jaws, the great white shark, she never gained an ounce. There wasn't much meat on her bones. But what was there was artistically arranged. Tracy's was one of the more likable members of the group that was heading for Shadow Island. She hadn't made any efforts to get into Christabel's clique. Just the opposite. She couldn't have cared less. Tracy was pretty, athletic, and headed for Stanford University when she graduated next year, financially backed by a generous swimming scholarship. So, Tracy, there has to be the one athletic girl, and she's sort of the, really too cool for it, but, we're friends, I guess. Tracy has a habit of being the only one to talk back to Melanie and Christabel during this trip. And really, she ends up saying what a lot of us are probably thinking during this time period. But, it is what it is. Okay, then here we have Ron described. Over 6 feet tall and ruggedly handsome, Ron was, without question, the most popular boy at Oak Ridge High. He was the captain of the football team, president of the student government, and involved in at least 3 other clubs. All those assets, of course, made him the perfect partner for Christabel Collins. I didn't think Christabel was as crazy about Ron as he was about her. Christabel was a junior, as I was, but Ron will be graduating in June. I asked her once what she would do next year with him off at college. Would she miss him terribly? She'd only last. I'm sure I'll find someone to help me pass the lonely hours, Angie, she'd said. You know that old saying, they're like streetcars. If you miss one, another will be coming along right behind. Which is an interesting thing to say about someone that you're supposedly madly in love with. But then again, high school relationships don't always work out. In fact, I know of maybe 3 in my personal life that have gone well. I mean, my grandparents, for one. One of my uncles and my aunt, and the woman he married, aka my aunt, they got married in, a little bit after high school, a little bit in high school. Can't remember exactly how that went. But they've been married ever since. I mean, they're still together, going strong. And then, of course, there's currently my best friend and her fiance, who have been together since like sophomore, junior year, somewhere in there of high school, and they are still together. And honestly, I'm proud of them. Then, of course, we're going to figure out things about James and Chips. Here we go. Chip was Melanie's boyfriend. He was athletic and popular, but not particularly smart. He couldn't be, considering the fact he thought he was Mr. Lucky himself, the king of the hill, to be sweet, sexy little Melanie's main man. I rest my case. Chip is kind of the definition of dumb jock. But he does make some good points here and there, but he's a lot like Ron in that they care more about the girls that they're with than the girls care about them, and it makes them kind of look dumb in the aftermath. Then we have James. Now, the thing about James, well, so we're going to read this and then I'll find the better description. But James is the more, I guess, sensitive of the guys. He's actually acknowledged to have had mental health issues, which is big in 1993, for a guy to say anything about having issues like that. So, where are James and Chip? Christabel asked. Oh, they're locking up the cars and bringing in the rest of the gear, replied Ron. You know James. That guy's such a worrier. I told him we could leave some of the stuff out there overnight, but he's nervous about someone sneaking around in the dead of night and ripping us off. Well, we all know James has problems with his nerves, Melanie said. What do you mean? I asked. Christabel and Melanie exchanged glances. Don't tell me you believe him when he said he went off for a couple of weeks last fall because his grandmother was sick and they thought she was going to die, Christabel said incredulously. Honestly, Angie, I thought you were smarter than that. You mean that's not why he was gone? Of course not. His grandmother's as healthy as a horse. So where did he go? Are you serious? Christabel asked. You mean you really don't know? No, I mean, yes, I'm serious. No, I don't know. He'd been real depressed for weeks. You must have noticed. And then, skip a little bit. Well, trust me, Angie. Christabel was saying he'd gotten himself into this awful depression where he just kind of moped around all the time. Finally, his parents took him away to the hospital where they gave him pills and treatments and stuff. He's pretty much okay now. We hope, Melanie said with a nasty laugh. What was the problem, I asked. What was he depressed about? Christabel suddenly became very busy sorting through the gear Ron had piled up in the middle of the room. Anyway, which, infers that Christabel knows she's just hiding it. And because she's not just spilling the beans, even though she seemed very willing to do so at first, means she's probably involved somehow. Or she, Angie kind of questions it, thinks that maybe there was some romantic feelings or something. Or maybe a bad prank. Things like that. Here. Christabel was hiding something about James. Knowing Christabel and her self-centered attitude toward other people's feelings, it was obvious she had been mixed up somehow in James's emotional breakdown. If she hadn't been, she would have had no problem airing James's dirty laundry. And then the other two who are coming are the supposed chaperones of this trip, Mr. and Mrs. Holmberg. I hope I'm saying that right. So Mr. Holmberg was head of the science department at Oak Ridge. Every spring break, he took a small group of students on a camp out to an island in a remote part of the state. The purpose of the expedition was to study the flora and fauna of the heavily wooded island, and Mr. Holmberg was always generous in giving extra science credits to those making the trip with him. A week on Shadow Island and a decent written report were enough to ensure a minimum grade of B- in science. And then we find out that this is the reason why Christabel, Melody, and Tracy had come on the trip. And, well, the reason James had come on the trip, too. He's trying to make up for some lost credits for the time that he was hospitalized. And the girls are making up for credits. We find out that Christabel and Melanie were more focused on their social life than their grades, so they're trying to get their grades up so that their parents don't kill them. And Tracy has been real focused on her swim meets and keeping up with her athletics. This year needs to do some working on her grades, because if her grades slip, then the scholarship could slip away too. Meanwhile, the reason that Chip and Ron and Kane are obvious. Their girlfriends are coming, so they're thinking that, they might get some alone time. For those of you who can't see me, I'm wagging my eyebrows like, hello, ladies. They want to have sex. Yeah. Teenage boys, am I right? And then Tracy, my bad, not Tracy. Angie's there because she has the best science grades in the class. And the others are like, come on, Angie, you can help us. We'll be forever grateful. And so that's how Angie got to come. And Mr. Holmberg's wife is coming, but and Miss Holmberg was a frail, thin little woman in contrast to her husband, an outdoorsy, barrel-chested man. It was rumored he spent his weekends hiking nature trails, binoculars in hand, in search of some rarely sighted bird. Ron said he saw him once in a park with a butterfly net, running after a choice specimen. Meanwhile, Miss Holmberg's, she is, well, Miss Holmberg taught home ec and was always giving us lectures on her ideas of right living, like avoiding alcohol and watching out for tea and coffee and not eating fatty, sugary things. That's basically the only description we get of those two. And then, of course, Shadow Island is the island and where they're going for this expedition to learn about the flora and the fauna to raise their grades. And they had talked to a senior named Cindy Morris, who'd been on the trip last year. Was like, look, the island's pretty bleak, spooky even. There's an old abandoned cabin there that you'll be staying in. It used to be a hunting lodge, but that was ages ago. You'll be roughing it, all right. Believe me, you'll earn every credit Mr. Holmberg gives you. And Shadow Island is named because of there are these high cliffs on the island that cast these large shadows over it. So that's why it's called Shadow Island. You know, fun. So they don't immediately go to the island. They all kind of meet up, not like the night before. And then their plan is to go immediately the next morning to get there and set up and then be able, because to get to the island, you have to row a canoe. And they've rented out the canoes. There's 4 of them. 2 for the Holmbergs, or 1 for the Holmbergs, 1 for Ron and Christabel, 1 for Melanie and Chip, and 1 for Tracy, James, and Angie. But things don't quite go as planned. Sometime during the night, so while they're out, during the night, the kids are allowed to go and essentially have like a mini pizza party before they start roughing it. And on the way back, they get stopped by the police, who are like, hey, be on the lookout. There's this dude out and about. And it's kind of like, and the guy that is out, his name's Amos. And apparently he has escaped from a mental institution that he was in. Or a psychiatric facility, however you want to call it. And he's wandering the streets and everything, and everybody's like, oh great, we have to worry about a dangerous guy, ooh. You know, which the girls were some of the girls, like Christabel and Melanie, are a little more freaked out than everybody else. The others are just like, oh, fun. But they're not as worried, because again, the way the police made him seem, he was only really bad if you scared him. Because apparently the reason he escaped in the first place was because he was being mistreated by a guy he was working with in the cafeteria at the facility. There was like a bullying situation going on, and he couldn't take it anymore, so he stabbed the dude and left. You know, as you do. But anyway, they're like, look, we can talk. He's not dangerous, okay? He can be talked down and reasoned with. We just want people to be on the lookout so that if they do run into him, they can, like, keep him talking, keep him calm until we show up. But, like, unless you spook him or you try to upset him, he's not a danger. Anyway, they go, and they're like, okay, officer, thanks. And they, of course, they stay at the hostel. Or hostel. Is it hostel or hostel? They stay there. And are preparing for the long, grueling time they're about to have. Well, the day comes, the morning comes. Everybody's getting ready to go. And they notice the Holmbergs aren't up or doing anything. The Holmbergs are like, so we've come down with something. Miss Holmberg is the one who tells them, and she does it in this very polite way of saying that they ate something last night that upset their tummies, so they were having bathroom trips. And, of course, the rest of the gang is like, oh no, except they're actually really excited, because this means if they go on the trip right now, they'll be unsupervised for a little while. And they'll get to have fun. A wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of fun. And Miss Holmberg tries to argue with him, like, no, it's not safe, don't do it. But she decides to do it anyway. But they decide to go do it anyway. And they set up and they go and they have both fun going on the canoeing trip and are also very upset. Like, Melanie and Christabel argue about how hard it is to paddle the canoes. there's like a little race going on. And we find out a little bit more about James, that he enjoys audio recording. So he always carries like a little tape recorder around with him, and he's like recorded bird songs. He's recorded things from their school's orchestra club. Just fun little things, you know? Something to listen to. Well, they finally make it to Shadow Island, and they park the canoes, and they know that there's a storm about to come, so they try to pull the canoes up far enough on the island so that the water and the storm can't push them away and into, deeper into the river, because you don't want the canoes to get damaged. And then they make their way up to the old hunting lodge, the little cabin. And of course, everybody's like, oh, hell no, about where they're staying. This place it's decrepit. It's kind of falling apart. There's a lot of dust everywhere. And they're just like, well, shit. And like Christabel and Melody especially are are really upset. And Tracy, the only thing she's upset about is she has really bad allergies. So she's like, great, we're going to clean this place up, and I'm going to spend the rest of forever sneezing and hacking. Which, I mean, she tells the group that, she brought her nasal spray if she needs it, but, like, she doesn't want to have to use it, because the stuff's expensive and everything. So after they kind of set up into the rooms, there's, like, one side, one room that they dedicated the girls, one room dedicated to the boys. They decided to kind of split up to do maintenance. Some of the girls like Christabel and Melanie do not want to go out into the woods at all. So they have elected to do some of the light cleaning, the dusting, the cobweb getting and the sweeping and everything to make sure that it's livable. Meanwhile, James is going to turn on some of the pump and stuff around the cabin. I think he's going to check in on the outhouse too. But his main job, along with Chip, Ron, Tracy, and Angie, is to gather the firewood. Because when the storm comes, it's going to be cold. Nobody's going to want to be, sitting there chilling. So, firewood. And, everybody goes and does their jobs. Everything seems fine. But, and then, everybody comes back to the cabin. Except for Chip. So they give Chip a few minutes, thinking maybe he got turned around somewhere. But after a while, they decide to go look for him. And when they go look for him, well, Chip, we finally found him. Chip was lying on his face. He was still. Too still. Was he passed out or what? Ron asked. It wasn't until we gathered around him that we noticed the large clot of blood that darkened the blonde hair on the back of his skull. He's hurt! Melanie sobbed. Oh, Chip! Ron and James gently rolled Chip on his back. His eyes were open. There was no flicker of movement in them. Why isn't he moving? Melanie whispered. What are you doing, James? James didn't answer. He bent over Chip and tried to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He watched in horrid fascination. Finally, James leaned back and rubbed his eyes. It's no use, he said. He's dead. Melanie took a step backward. She was so pale I was afraid she was going to faint. No, not Chip. He can't be, she appealed to Ron. He's not dead, is he, Ron? Ron seemed unable to answer. It was Christabel who said, Yes, Melanie. Chip's dead. But how? Melody was sobbing now. James and Chip were still kneeling over the body. How? Melanie repeated. James looked up. He must have slipped and fallen. But his head! The blood on his head, all that blood, Melanie moaned. I guess he hit his head on a rock when he fell. James' voice wavered a little. He sounded uncertain. Ron was as quiet and unmoving as Chip's body. He seemed to be in a state of shock. Tears were running down his cheeks, but he made no effort to wipe them away. He fell and hit his head hard enough to kill himself? I asked. Well, what else could it be? James replied. What rock? Where's the rock? I asked. I don't see any rock. Oh, for God's sake, Angie, Christabel said. What difference does that make now? She had her arm around Melanie, who was weeping uncontrollably. I ignored her. But it's important, James. If he accidentally killed himself, it ought to be obvious how he did it. Where's the rock? James looked around. Then he pointed. There. The one with the blood on it. Has to be the rock. The one. The rock was a few feet away from Chip's body. I shuddered. Yeah, I see, but how could he have hit his head on it and land over there? I don't know, but it must have happened that way, though. But James... Tracy put her hand on my shoulder. She gave me a warning pinch and said on me to be quiet, with an almost imperceptible jerk of her head toward Melanie and Christabel. Give it a rest, she said in a low, almost inaudible tone. Those two are going to lose it completely. Then she said aloud, she said firmly, Chip slipped and hit his head, Angie. There's no other possible explanation. Anyway, the kids are all freaked out, and the boys end up taking his body and putting it in like the little tool shed thing to keep it out of the rain and the storm. And their plan is the next day they're going to go to the canoes and go back to the mainland and be like, hey, we had an accident out here, you know. Well, everybody is trying to say it's an accident, but like Angie and James and even Tracy are kind of like questioning things, especially because, you know, Chip was found face down with the heel part here on the back of his neck. It didn't make sense, you know? So they're trying not to freak out. They're trying to just get through the night. But then morning comes and they find, they go out to, you know, they get ready, they go out to the canoes, and they find that the canoes have been destroyed by the storms. They had somehow not been secured where they were and were out in the water, just tore apart, essentially. And everybody starts kind of panicking, like, oh great, now we're stuck. We're going to have to wait for the Holmbergs to get here, which will take them at least, 2 days to get over the sickness that they're having. And they're like freaking out, wondering what happened, you know? Until it hits them that, you know, they'd heard about Amos. And Amos grew up around these parts. And they're thinking maybe Amos killed Chip. So there's a group that goes out to look for Amos. Angie, I think, stays back this time. But, you know, people, they go out to look for Amos. Because they're like, if he's here, it's, you know, we gotta know. They look and they don't find Amos. And everybody comes back and they got more firewood. Everything's just kind of like, oh great, this is our life now. Well, Tracy ends up having an allergy attack, so she goes to get her nasal spray. No. Well, let me back up a little bit. James and Angie are together when they're looking for Amos. I skipped a part, I guess. My bad. But Amos, it looks like he's left the island. So they do go back and they tell everybody that he's gone, that everybody's kind of more relaxed. But, again, Tracy ends up having her an allergy attack. So, she disappeared into the bathroom and returned with her blue toiletries bag. Thank heaven for modern medicine, she said, rummaging around in the bag and pulling out her nasal spray. The little maroon and white bottle was familiar to us all. She never went anywhere without it. She inserted the nozzle in the first one nostril, and then the other, spraying and sniffling. What happened next occurred almost too quickly to follow. Suddenly, Tracy choked. She gasped for air, her face turned a dark purplish red, and her mouth opened and contorted briefly, and she fell to the floor. We gathered around her, struck dumb and motionless, staring stupidly, too surprised to react. Tracy's now dead. Which, of course, makes more panic, especially when they kind of investigate her nasal spray and note that it smells like almonds. And what poison smells like almonds, boys and girls and everything and anything and everyone else? Cyanide. Which means there is another killer. There's someone on the island trying to kill them. Everybody's like freaking out. Especially when someone suggests that the killer might be one of them. Because how else could they get to Tracy's bag? Because Amos wouldn't have known to do that. And considering where Amos has been for the last while, where would he have even got it? Also, in between all this, James tries to have a... Seriously? One moment, everybody. So, backtracking a little bit, when they're looking for Amos, James kind of makes a move on Angie, talking about how he's always thought she was really pretty, even when she had her little horn-rimmed glasses, and thought she was just the cutest thing. And Angie, well, she admits that there was a part of her that wished for something like this to happen one day. But she's currently heartbroken. Because, see, unbeknownst to everyone else, she's grieving the loss of her first love, named Michael. She never goes into detail about what happened to Michael, other than that, everybody calls what happened an accident, but she knows better. But she can't prove it, but she's pretty sure it wasn't really an accident. And that he was her first love, and he was part of the same geeky group that she was part of, and that they were super close. They were, according to her, in love. No, I say according to her. And she was just... She's still really heartbroken. But it says she just tells James that now's not the time because, they're looking for a potential killer. And he's like, yeah, you're right, but maybe when this is all over. And she's like, maybe. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, with Tracy dead, everybody's like panicking about, who could be the murderer. And they even start going around the room throwing accusations at each other. From things like jealousy about football scholarships to secret romances and secret affairs. Just throwing things out, but nothing's really sticking. So everybody agrees, we'll cool it. We'll keep our eyes out. And they take Tracy to the shed with Chip. And I'm like, look, we'll figure something out. Maybe the Holmbergers will be here soon. As the group becomes increasingly paranoid and angry at each other and kind of at each other's throats, Ron ends up dying. Everybody goes, see what happens is everybody decides to go out to look for more firewood because of all the storms coming through. And so Ron's not really into wanting to do the going looking for firewood. He's found the flare gun, and he's wanting to shoot it off and be like summoning someone. Where James is arguing like, look, dude, nobody's gonna be able to hear it. Nobody's gonna hear it. We would be wasting the flare. Which, of course, sparks some speculation about, so James, what you afraid of? Huh? You perchance the killer? Like, Melanie throws it in his face all the time. Been throwing it in his face this whole trip about how he's been institutionalized and stuff, and maybe he's crazy. You know, just throwing all kinds of slings and accusations at him. And he's just like, I'm just trying to keep us from wasting a resource we may need later. Which, you know, fair enough. They let Angie stay behind this time. Because before it was Christabel and Melanie. Was it Melanie? Is that her name? I knew it a minute ago. Yeah, it is Melanie. You know, I'm going to be quite honest with you. My brain isn't exactly working like it should. I'm not firing on all cylinders. I'm a little tired. It is what it is. Okay. So this time it's Angie, and what she's doing is she's making food for everybody. Or she's planning on, like, keeping the cabin kind of clean and wanting to make, like, sandwiches and stuff. But Ron ends up coming back after everybody's gone. He's like, look, I told James that I was going to the bathroom, but I came back for the flare gun. Which, of course, Angie's like, are you sure about this? He goes, look, we need help, okay? Someone here is either someone here is a killer, or there's someone on this island killing us. And I don't want to be next. Famous last words. Because, Ron is next. Everybody else comes back, and they're like, okay, so where's Ron? And it's like, don't know. Where is Ron? Well, everybody decides to, you know, go look for Ron. Especially because after Angie admits to everybody that he came back for the flare. So, here we go. I saw something on the beach. Something terrible. Christabel saw it the very same instant I did. She reached out and dug her long fingernails in mine. Oh my God, it's Ron. Melanie, who was following close behind, slammed up against us. Her eyes widened with horror when she saw Ron. What used to be Ron, lying face downward on the sand by the water's edge. We walked forward slowly, dragging our feet. Melanie and Christabel were hanging on to me like two giant clinging leeches. It was like seeing Chip all over again. Only this time it was much worse. It was worse. Much worse. The back of Chip's head had been covered with blood, but the back of Ron's was missing, as though it had been blown away, leaving only a mass of bloody pulp. His head, Christabel said in a high, tight voice. It's gone. She repeated the word several times, as if the condition of the body, not the fact that Ron obviously was dead, was the most important thing about the terrible scene before them. James had sprinted on ahead and was bending everybody. Don't come any closer, girls, he said in a strange string of voice. Then he leaned over and was violently sick on the sand. That seemed to set Melanie off, too. She began to make moaning, wailing sounds. And this is where they come to the conclusion that, yeah, this is really no accident, no mix-up. Someone flat out murdered Ron. They pointed the flare gun at the back of his head and set it off. Well, this ends up starting a major fraction between Melanie and Christabel against James and Angie. Accusations start flying. Melanie and Christabel run and lock the doors to the cabin, and refuse to let Angie and James in until they remind each other that, how do you know the other's not the killer? So they come in. They all refuse to eat. Most of them, Christabel and Melanie, refuse to eat the sandwiches that Angie made, and instead, so her and James eat theirs. And Christabel and Melanie make their own. And hold on, she's back. Well, bless you, darling. Anyway, the accusations are still there, but they decide to just sort of stick together, keep everybody's eyes on each other, because the bad stuff only seems to happen when they're separated. Seems promising enough. So their goal now is just to kind of rough it out until the Holmbergs show up. The next morning, they're making breakfast. It's going to be like a light thing of Pop-Tarts and teas. Melanie and Christabel are still kind of shaken up. Melanie's really bad shaken. And so while they're making tea, and Christabel gives her this cup, like, come on, you gotta do it. You gotta drink something. This will calm you down. Well, calmed her down, all right. Maybe you'll feel better after you eat something, Christabel told Melanie. It's not much of a breakfast, but you also try to get something down. She picked Melanie's mug of tea off the little end table. Here, she said, holding up to Melanie. So, drink this. Drink your tea. Melanie took the cup from Christabel's hands, made a wry face at it. Yes, mother. She put the mug to her lips and took several long swallows. Then she stopped drinking, and a look of surprise came over her face, as though she couldn't figure out what was happening to her. She began to choke, dropping the mug and putting her hands to her throat. The mug fell to the floor. Tea puddled out around it. We watched, stunned, helpless, just as we had when Tracy died. Melanie's face seemed suffused with blood. Her lips twisted and turned blue. Her eyes stared angrily, accusingly at us. Then she fell from the chair. At this point, James and Angie are like looking at Christabel like, you killed her. And there's like this huge argument that breaks out. And then Christabel remembers where James said he put the flare the night before. And she grabs it, and she runs out the door. James and Angie are like, what are we gonna do? She's out there. And James is like, look, I'll go find her. I'll hunt her down. I'll stop her. We can knock her out, lock her in, and then wait for the Holmbergs. And it's like, okay, but what if she hurts you? And he's like, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm tough, I can handle this. He's trying to make a good show for Angie. Which Angie's like, I don't know, dude, she's a psycho. She's showing she's psycho. But he insists. He insists. So she lets him go. Then after a while, she decides she's going to go looking herself. He comes back and he's like, I didn't find her. We're going to have to, I don't know what to do. I'm going to go back out there. I just need to come warm up for a second. And she decides she's going with him. So they decide to go. And when they find, and they do eventually find Christabel. I clutched my little paring knife tighter and ran over to him. "What is it, James?" He didn't answer me. He didn't need to. His face was white. He raised a hand which trembled as if he had palsy and pointed. It was Christabel. She was lying up against the tree, her head resting on the trunk as if she were taking a short break. Her eyes were open and staring, and her jaw was rigidly agape as though she tried to scream. Her face was a peculiar bluish color. The flare gun lay on the ground beside her. "She's dead," I said. "Christabel's dead." "Christabel's dead." Christabel, then, was not the murderer. And there were only two. There were two. Only two. James and I. Well, just James and Angie. Now, here's some context that I think is going to help you decide the murderer. James has kind of had a falling out with his friends, but he still considers them his friends. He just isn't as close to them as he used to be because of the breakdown he had. The breakdown he had because there was this party and a prank that he was involved in that really shook him. James, Christabel, Tracy, Melanie, Chip, and Ron, the cool kids, the popular kids, threw this big party. I can't remember. It was like they called it like last fall or something. Or they said it was around like last fall. And they invited Michael. The same Michael that Angie really loved and really cared about. And was in the process of dating, kind of. Getting closer. Well, the prank was to get nerdy, geeky Michael drunk. And they did. And then Michael wanted to drive, and they didn't stop him. They encouraged him and laughed. And then he drove off a cliff. He died. James was the only one who really felt bothered by it because no one else came forward. And it looked like an accident after all. The dude was drunk driving. What was he thinking? But James felt bad about the situation. So, was it James, the one who, was feeling so guilty about what happened that he literally went to a hospital about it? Like, did something snap? Did he, or was it Angie? Or is it Angie? The girl who will never really get to truly experience the high school love she wanted because his life was taken too soon. Who? Give you a few minutes, make your decision. Also, so I can flip. But, you be thinking about that? And while you figure that out, I'm going to read this. So this was it. This was how it was supposed to end. This was the way it had been planned right from the start. The two of us, killer and victim, final victim. For a brief moment, we said nothing. We simply stared into each other's eyes. What you're looking for? A reprieve from death? An explanation? Forgiveness? But what can a victim say to change a murderer's mind? What argument is strong enough to stop a killing machine? Why should a murderer try to explain why it was necessary to kill 5, soon to be 6 people? For forgiveness? Do you need forgiveness when you've committed the perfect crime, or is that only for those who will get caught? This murderer would not get caught, and this is different from, written differently from the rest of it. Because the rest of it, it's completely in italics. So, who? Have you made your decision? Are you ready? I sidestepped cautiously over Christabel's body, keeping an eye on James and holding my pitiful little paring knife out between us. Then I bent down quickly and picked up the flare gun. So this is it, I said softly, circling warily around James. The end. Just the two of us. He made no move to intercept me, to try to get the flare gun away from me. He just stared at me, dazed and unbelieving. Angie? His voice was weak. I could barely hear him. It was you? You killed all those people? Our friends? Can't believe it. I stopped circling and smiled. It was a good feeling, that smile. Believe it. And I did it well, didn't I? You never suspected, did you? James was trembling. I could see it. I could see his whole body quiver. Even his lips trembled. Felt powerful watching him tremble. Powerful. Justified. But why? He managed to gasp out. He'd taken a step forward. I held out my knife and said, don't come any closer, James. If you do, I'll cut you with this just like I did Christabel. A look of bewilderment came over his face. You killed Christabel with that? Looks harmless, doesn't it? I said, laughing, amused by his confusion. But this isn't just an ordinary paring knife, James. It's been dipped in curare. You've heard of curare, haven't you? It's that poisonous stuff South American Indians use on their arrows. Keep in mind this was written back in, 1993, okay? Okay? The smallest cut kills instantly. James shook his head. Curare? What are you talking about? How'd you ever get your hand on something like that? Well, if you want to murder someone, I told him, it really comes in handy to have a daddy who owns a string of pharmacies. I bet you didn't know they use this stuff in medicine, did you, James? It isn't fatal when taken orally, only when it reaches the bloodstream through a cut or puncture. Anyway. He's figured out he's going to be next. And then, of course, he's, still trying to wrap his head around the fact that she's the one who killed everyone. How? Why? So, and, she admits that, she did kind of like him, but her heart already belonged to someone, and there were circumstances that would have never allowed them to work out. And so he's like, what circumstances? What on earth would make you want to kill your friends? You trying to stall this for time, James? Or do you have some crazy idea you can get me talking and jump me and take away my knife? I raised the flare gun and pointed it directly at him. My hand didn't tremble. Not the least little bit. I was proud of my steady nerves. I have 2 weapons, I told him. And I think you know how painful it would be if I shot you with this flare gun. So don't try anything stupid, James. Behave yourself and I'll give you a quick death with the curare. I won't try to jump you, Angie. But if you're going to kill me, I'd like to know why. You owe me that much. And, she admits that she likes James. And so she'll admit it, All right, then, I said. Fair enough. I'll tell you why. I'm going to kill you because you were there at the murder, and you did nothing to stop it. Whose murder? Chip's? Tracy's? Ron's? No, not those, I said. Besides, they were executions, not murders. Legal executions. Although the case never came to court. Except for Tracy, though. She was just an innocent bystander. So, like, Tracy wasn't really part of it. But because she came on the trip, she kind of had to go. I don't understand, he said. I haven't the slightest idea what you're talking about. I think you do, I told him evenly. So anyway, she ended up... So she ends up telling him. What murder? He repeated. The murder of Michael Giddings, I said. James drew in his breath and took a step backward. Now who needed soothing? But that wasn't a murder, he protested weakly. Yes, it was, I said. Unfortunately, however, no court in the land would see it as that. But it was murder all the same. You took advantage of Michael's innocence. You five, Ron, Christabel, Melanie, Chip, and you, deliberately got Michael drunk at a stupid party and then put him in his car and let him drive home. So he never reached home, did he? No, he drove off a cliff and was burned to death when the car exploded. I held back my tears. I couldn't let myself cry, not yet anyway. Those tears would come in handy later when I told the Holmbergs how I had to fight James for my life. How I couldn't believe he was the murderer. I was in love with him, of course. Till he found Chris, and then he'd gone crazy, and he tried to kill me too. What happened to Michael Giddings was an accident, Angie, James said. It was terrible and pointless, but it was an accident, not murder. Why was he so important to you that you commit murder for him? I love Michael more than anything in the world, I told him. I don't think you could possibly understand how I felt about him. James opened his mouth to say something. Something disbelieving, judging from the expression on his face, but I cut him off. Yes, I know, I said. I'm only 16. 16-year-old girls get crushes, but this wasn't just a silly crush, James. Every now and then, two people are selected by fate. I guess you can call it two partners. Perfect partners. And that's what Michael and I were. Then what was he doing at that party? James asked. His voice was cruel and cutting. Christabel's party. He came by himself, not with you. I could feel my face turn red. Michael, I said, had a philosopher's love of beauty. And Christabel was beautiful. It was only a temporary infatuation. He would have seen right through her. Maybe he had before the party ended. I couldn't hold back the tears now. They were running down my cheeks. He wangled an invitation to that party. I told him not to go. I said they weren't his kind of people. I'd heard Christabel laughing at him behind his back, calling him a geek. Hated her for that. A geek, Michael? Why, she wasn't even worthy to tie his shoes. He had a brilliant mind and dreams of using it to change the world for the better. James had to say, please, Angie, and you miserable pack of hyenas, you thought it would be a big joke to get the geek drunk. Well, you succeeded, didn't you? And then you put him in his car. Why didn't you just put a bullet through his brain? It would have been a more merciful death than being burned alive. I had nothing to do with it, Angie. James said, his face was ashen. I'd been drinking that night, too. That's why I quit. That's why I had that nervous breakdown. The thought of what happened that night made me sick, physically and mentally sick. No, you didn't feed him the liquor, but just stood by and watched, didn't you? I accused. And you didn't say anything. You're the worst kind of murderer, James. The kind that just stands there and does nothing. That's why I saved you for last. For the poetic justice of it. So you could stand by, again, and do nothing. I see, James said quietly. So when did you decide to avenge Michael? I wiped the tears from my cheeks with the back of the hand that held the flare gun. Immediately, I replied. I knew I'd have to be accepted by Christabel and the rest of your stupid group first, though. So when I lost weight, got a new wardrobe and hairstyle, ditched my glasses for contact lenses, people started treating me differently right away. What fools. Anyway. Then she admits that she's the reason the chaperones couldn't come. Because she'd put laxatives in the hot chocolate that they were going to drink. She admits that she's the one who's messed with the canoes. Uh, she swapped out Tracy's nasal spray for one that was filled with cyanide. And she hid the cyanide and the curare that she used in her flashlight where the battery's supposed to go. Which explains why earlier in the book she'd asked to borrow James's. She talked about how she had got Chip because he didn't see her as a threat. And she got him by surprise. And then Ron, she admitted that she wanted it to be ugly and horrible because he was the worst of the worst of the worst. Which is why he got the flare gun. And then she's like, during her little speech, she realizes that the Holmbergs have shown up. And she's like, you know what? This works too. And she starts cutting off parts of her clothes to make it look like James had attacked her. And she started the tears up real good. And, of course, things don't go to plan there. Ready? Ready? So, like, she's arguing about how his fingerprints are on things. She's got a really good setup. And he's over here like, that's not gonna cut it. This isn't the perfect crime you think it is. Then he tells her why. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. It was his miniature tape recorder. He held it so I could see. The wheels were still turning. Still taping. I put it in my pocket when I went after Christabel, he explained. I wanted to tape what she said to that in case something happened to me. No one could blame you for the murders. I couldn't speak. But now I've taped everything you said, James told me. Everything you said is right here. Guess you forgot. I was an audio freak. I had to clear my throat before I could get my voice under control. Yes. You're an audio freak, and I'm a science nerd. The freaks, I said with rising hysteria, have triumphed over the nerds. Hot tears were streaming down my cheeks as the Holmbergs came toward us, calling our names. And that's where it ended. Oh, I love this though. Okay, it's kind of gave me like teen slasher vibes, you know? Which I guess technically that is what it is. And I kind of like the twist. Like, don't get me wrong, when I was reading it, the way things were hinted here and there about both James and Angie. Like, I was literally thinking maybe it was James or maybe Amos. Like, maybe Amos was still there. Or even like James, like after it was told that Amos had left, or who appeared to be Amos had left the island. I was thinking James, because everybody kept hinting about this thing that had happened that he was really upset about, and the way that they were talking, it was clear that, you know, all of the others were also involved. So, of course, he would, like, want, if that were the case, maybe he wanted revenge or something, or, like, clear his conscience in some way. Like, that was where I thought it was going, until we found out what it was that James supposedly went for. In the middle of, where was it? Oh, I know it's in here because I read it. I just can't remember where it was. Again, I really need to learn to annotate or something. But during one of the many sessions of throwing accusations around at each other, someone talked about how James was kind of about they hinted or alluded to the death of the freak, aka Michael, and how ever since then James had been uncool and unfun because he didn't want to drink with them or anything. And after I read that, I kind of started going, maybe and that's when it kind of set in for, oh shit, that sounds a lot like the accident that Angie was talked about with Michael. And then I realized that it was like the same thing, you know? Like, anyway, they were like, they were talking about, anyway, like, James stopped being fun, he stopped drinking, and they were like, you know, they talked about that. And anyway, when it hit me that they were talking about the same incident that killed Michael, I was like, oh shit, maybe it's Angie. And lo and behold, it's Angie. Although I also kind of secretly had a thing like maybe it was the teacher, like one of the teachers, like they faked being sick and everything. I also kind of thought that maybe there was like an elaborate major prank going on, and that all of the dead bodies weren't really dead, they were just pretending, and that they were really good at it, and then everything would be like this big, I don't know, shock, like, we're really alive, we got you. But again, it was Angie. I love it when we get a good kind of hinted at twist, you know? And I also love it when we get a Revenge of the Nerd sort of thing. I've talked about this before. I love Revenge of the Nerd, even if it doesn't always end well. I just, mwah. But that was Class Trip by Bebe Faz Rice. And I enjoyed it. It was a quick little read. It's a dime store read. I loved it though. I loved getting to play around with the thoughts. It kind of like, again, it seemed like one of those teen slasher movies, but it also kind of gave Lifetime movie vibes. Have you ever seen a Lifetime horror, thriller, whatever kind of movie? These teenagers are always getting into trouble. What is up with teenagers in trouble? But the ending kind of seemed ambiguous, though I guess we can assume that, or infer that with the Holmbergs there, someone's gonna have to say something. Oh, hey, there's a Class Trip too. I should try to find that. I wonder if it'll have more about what happened to Angie. But It's good. So, what are we doing next? Well, let's see. Next one's going to be a bit of a bigger read. A bit thicker. Jodi Picoult. I really hope I'm saying her name right. House Rules, a novel. So in the back, it says, when your son can't look you in the eye, does that mean he's guilty? Now, fair warning, this book was written, well, when I can find it. Oh, this book was written back in 2010. Interesting. Especially, wait, nope. Nope, this is just the 2010 thing. This was 19. No, it is 2010. Which is weird. Yeah, 2010. This is kind of weird because they use the term Asperger's syndrome instead of autism. So, bear with me on that, okay? But, here's the back. Jacob Hunt is a teen with Asperger's syndrome. He's hopeless at reading social cues or expressing himself well to others, though he is brilliant in many ways. But he has a special focus on one subject, forensic analysis. A police scanner in his room clues him in to crime scenes, and he's always showing up and telling the cops what to do. And he's usually right. But when Jacob's small hometown is rocked by a terrible murder, law enforcement comes to him. Jacob's behaviors are hallmark Asperger's, but they look a lot like guilt to the local police. Suddenly, the Hunt family, who only want to fit in, are directly in the spotlight. For Jacob's mother, Emma, it's a brutal reminder of the intolerance and misunderstanding that always threaten her family. For his brother, Theo, it's another indication why nothing is normal because of Jacob. And over this small family, the soul-searching, searing question looms: did Jacob commit murder? So this will be a bit of a thicker read. This is no dime store, but also, I'm not really okay, or I know that the term Asperger's syndrome is outdated now by 2020, past 2020 standards, or I'm not really going to say what the timeline is because I'm kind of doing a bunch of these before releasing them, because my life is crazy, and if I somehow get backed up or something happens, I kind of want to be able to continue posting, so I'm kind of cheating, but it is what it is. You gotta do what you gotta do, right? Right. But, actually I'm thinking this will start being released by like 2025, so sometime next year, so I can kind of promote, I guess. I don't know. Have y'all seen promotions? This is from the past. This is sort of future me, past me, talking to future audience. Anyway, whatever. I'm probably, if there is an audience, I don't know how well this is gonna do. This is for funsies, but I'm gonna read it. I've read some of her things off and on, like My Sister's Keeper, things like that. I enjoy it. She tends to write some really good, harder hitting novels that kind of make you think about the way life is and why. Make you question the normal. I know my mother is really big on Jodi Picoult, and also she's a banned book person. She's been banned. I'm sure after we read this, we'll figure out why. Ha 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 ha. I say, as if I don't know that it's probably because of subject matter being something that there's arguments about. But again, that's my only real issue so far. I haven't really read the book yet. But the Asperger's syndrome thing is kind of it's outdated. So but I'm gonna try to stay like when I do my video or my episode on it, I am gonna be trying to be faithful to the book because, well, it's a product of its time. Even though that time was only like 10 years ago. Or, well, technically longer. But, you know. Technically 14 years ago. Okay, I'll date me a little bit. I'll date this a little bit. But anyway. That's all I've got for right now. This has been Courtney McCullough with Ageless Writer Studios and Courtney's Book Club. And hopefully we'll see you later. Say bye, Salem. She's doing what she does best. Catnapping.